Welcome back everybody to the 6th Easy Build user meeting. The first of our talks today is by Alan O'Case from the Jülich Supercomputing Centre. Here we're talking about the LearnHPC project. Over to you, Alan.
Okay, good morning everyone. Today I'm here to talk a little bit about a side project of mine, or something that I'm interested in, which is kind of, I call it LearnHPC right now at least. And it's basically about creating a scalable HPC training framework and general infrastructure. If you don't know who I am, my name is Alan O'Case. I primarily work in one of the European HPC Centres of Excellence, so that's called ECAM. I work for the Jülich Supercomputing Centre, so that's one of the biggest HPC centres in Europe and currently home to the #7 machine in the top 500. And Anke in the next talk will tell you a little bit more about that. So I just wanted to start a little bit with the European context. So to talk a little bit about what's going on in Europe right now in terms of HPC and funding for HPC. So specifically, I wanted to discuss the EuroHPC joint undertaking. So that's currently a group of 32 European countries, signatories. It's about developing a pan-European supercomputing infrastructure, and they have this lofty goal that they want to have 2 machines in the top 500 in its lifetime. The idea there is to support research and innovation activities to create this supercomputing infrastructure and also an ecosystem around it, and use that then to stimulate technology supply industry. Basically, one of the big concerns is about generating European IP, particularly for silicon technology. So the goal, then they want to make these supercomputing resources available to a large number of public and private users, and that includes SMEs. For me, one of the key words there is available, right? So from what I can tell, and from the way that the money is split, the EuroHPC is primarily a hardware initiative. So they spent about 1.1 billion between 2018 and 2020, and the budget for the next 10 to 12 years is around about 8 billion currently, or at least that's the proposed budget. So, you know, as users of those kinds of resources, what do you expect? Well, it's probably not going to be that much different to how PRACE operates right now. The resources will be open to everyone, but of course it's a limited resource, so the access will be competitive and based on your science and your capability to use them. So, you know, as a result, it's not unexpected then that of the 32 countries, those that have an HPC culture, what I mean by culture is that they have a history of HPC usage and development, and it features a lot in among their scientists and among their formal education programs as well. Those countries that have that kind of infrastructure, they will of course have an implicit advantage, right? Because in a competitive process, they're likely to be that little bit more competitive. So talking specifically about this the formal education stuff, again, the European context here. So the European Commission commissioned a report back in 2018 that was looking at the academic offers of the formal education programs and also the demand for advanced profiles. So the industry demand in the EU for AI, HPC, and cybersecurity as well. I've just lifted a table from that report to show you here. So like the numbers, I don't know whether that's good or bad, but there's about 1,000 courses related to HPC, but 1/3 of those is in bachelor's programs and 2/3 in master's programs. So maybe that's good. I don't know, 1,000 might be considered a lot, but you have to consider the context of this report, right? So this report was written in 2018. And for me, at least, something that jumped out straight away, there was a kind of a big warning inside, and it was related to Brexit. So the context at the time was, you know, Brexit was happening and going to happen, and it now has happened at this stage. And so in that report, it was highlighted that the UK had about 62% of all the EU HPC programs, which sounds like an astonishing percentage. Of course, there's an asterisk beside this because part of that was down to the methodology that was used in the report. So the report used an AI methodology, and it acknowledged that it was heavily biased towards English language courses. So this may not be a completely accurate representation of the reality. Nevertheless, it's a big warning mark, right, about that there may be for the EU, what's now the EU without the UK, and this is probably a warning sign. And in some sense, that's why I wanted to talk about, like, I've seen that in national programs as well, where spending money on hardware is in some sense easy, and because you get something physical in the end that you can stand beside and get your photo taken beside. But that hardware investment is like has a 5-year cycle. Okay, so it's not really a long-term investment. If you invest in people, that's usually it takes a long time to see the benefit of that, but the investment also has a much longer lifetime. And that's what I think is really hard, right? So bootstrapping the investment, the hardware investment, so that you come to see the impact in terms of the IP and also the type of SMEs that you're generating. That's a really hard thing. And it needs a lot of people. It needs people who are able to leverage the resources, who are able to improve upon them and build upon them and contribute to these kinds of resources as well. Of course, yeah, you could always import the expertise, but that's not really a sustainable option, certainly not for something in the size of the European Union, where there's more than 400 million people, right? So it wouldn't be sustainable. It's certainly not desirable. And also there's something that you want to avoid in the EU as well, which is internal brain drain, right? So having countries that are particularly strong in this case, who are pulling all the talent from the smaller countries, who can't be as competitive, right? Just because of their size, really. So what I feel is a space for or that there should be prioritized is a pipeline to be able to, identify talent in this space, develop it and integrate it into, whether it's into the academic space or into the industrial space, SME space as well. And you need that, or else you need a very big pool of existing talent. And from my perspective, I don't really think this exists. I don't think this massive pool of existing talent exists. Otherwise, we know about it, right? We wouldn't struggle so hard to hire people if this was the case. So this is where HPC, LearnHPC comes in, or the kind of idea behind it comes in, the idea of creating a big net to catch a lot of users at the beginners level, right? So, and that's why it needs to be scalable, right? Because we have to scale out to a very large community. And the argument that could have been made in the previous slide is that, there's always going to be good people, right? You're always going to have the cream who rise to the top. But you have to be careful, right? Because you have to make sure that you have a lot of people to filter from, right? So that you put a lot of milk in the bucket in the first place, right? So that you put a lot of effort into making sure that you have a big group of people that contribute to the growth here. So me personally, where do I come from? So I've been basically 10 years now working on EU projects that are primarily around developing and growing HPC user communities. I did that for 5 years in a geographic region, right? So in the Eastern Mediterranean, where I traveled around to places like Turkey, Greece, Cyprus, Egypt, Lebanon, Jordan, and introduced people to HPC resources in those areas. And one of the most effective things we did then was a roadshow. We basically had a scripted, 2 to 3 hour event where we would go along, talk about the resources, give people initial access as well. So let them log on to a cluster, let them compile a code and run a code. And it was all scripted, and it worked really well for us. We got a lot of penetration by doing that. I now work in an HPC Center of Excellence, which is focused on material sciences. One of the events that we do is something called Extended Software Development Workshops. These are very different beasts, and we only do a couple of those a year, and they last between 1 and 2 weeks. Usually people come to develop a particular piece of software, but we take the opportunity to push their boundaries a little bit, right? So if they haven't been introduced to parallelism before, we will take the opportunity to show them a little bit about that. Or if they're familiar with it, we might show them more, new technologies that they may not yet be aware of. Something like, for example, COCOS, to introduce some kind of independence from the underlying hardware, particularly when you start talking about accelerators or something like that. I think in general that you have to be aware that if we're talking about EU level training, then, and in particular EuroHPC, right, where there are 32 countries, within that group there are thousands, literally thousands of third level institutions, and there's more than 400 million people probably. So basically everything that you have to do needs to be scalable. And to cast that kind of wide net, there are a lot of challenges, right? There's for sure there's a technical challenge. I mean, the connectivity in different places is certainly not equal everywhere. You've got like the hardware infrastructure situation, the software infrastructure situation, and the expertise in the areas, and then how all that is all configured together. So it's a real technical challenge. But then you also have a pedagogical challenge, right? So the material, right? High quality material and instructor and people who are capable of giving that material well. You need those people, and that has to be scaled. That infrastructure has to be scalable too, because you need to go to so many countries and potentially in many different languages. So what LearnHPC really is just a mashup of other projects that you've already heard of. Well, some of them you've already heard about this week. So yesterday we heard about Magic Castle, which is the one that generates this this cluster in public clouds. So it supports the commercial providers like AWS and Azure, where we get where we've got some sponsorship already. But also OpenStack infrastructure. So the one that we use is the Fenix Research Infrastructure, which is another European project that provides cloud resources for European researchers. So we got an allocation of resources there. On top of Magic Castle, then we have the EESSI software stack, so the European Environment for Scientific Software Installations. That was also discussed earlier this week. It's basically just it's a software project to try and create a software stack that's common and that can be used commonly across all different kinds of hardware and all different kind of capabilities as well, and still is capable in terms of, well, in the end it will be capable in terms of accelerator usage and also in terms of the interconnects that are available. And the last one that hasn't been mentioned here is something called HPC Carpentry that I contribute to. So HPC Carpentry is basically the software carpentry concept, which perhaps you're familiar with, which is a shared resource in terms of training material. So they create lessons and lesson material, which are detailed guides about how to give lessons on particular topics. The vanilla software carpentry program is on the shell and Python basically. But the HPC Carpentry one right now, what we might primarily focusing on is an introduction to high performance computing, but there are other initiatives as well on parallelism. I've also done a lesson on running lamps at scale, so that's another one that we have that I've been working on. But in general, there are a couple of different groups that are interested in the space and are creating lessons that potentially people can take away and use themselves. And the other thing that software carpentry does is instructor training, right? So teaching people how to teach. And for me, that was a really interesting process, because while I do give training courses pretty regularly, I don't do it every week. I do it a couple of times a year. So I don't have that opportunity to develop a lot of expertise just from experience, right? And so learning a little bit about pedagogical approaches and how to be an effective teacher was pretty eye-opening for me. So that was really useful. So I thoroughly recommend people to try and take that. And so basically we put all those together, and that's it's the general idea behind what LearnHPC is. When I got the resources on the Fenix Research Infrastructure, one of the first things that somebody said was, why would you use a toy cluster when you can give them a training course in the real thing? So my employer has some of the largest machines in Europe, right? And it's within my power to create training courses and allow people to give people access there. But that comes with an awful lot of downsides, right? So primarily one of them is that there are really strict security requirements, right? And lots of bureaucracy, both for me as the instructor and also for the learners themselves. And this can be a little bit intimidating, certainly when you're a beginner, right? So people asking you questions about things that you've never heard about before, so like SSH keys or something like that. And I know that this is even more difficult on other sites as well. And then the other thing is if I'm running or working in the German HPC Center, would I really consider running training courses for a small university in Croatia that has no direct connection with the center? No, that's not a real possibility, right? I mean, it's not a realistic possibility, I don't think. And the nice thing about the cloud-based clusters is that they're unencumbered, okay? I mean, I can bring them up, I can take them down, I can throw them away. And And also with the users themselves, you can kind of make them aware that, you know, this is maybe not as secure as it should be. Like in the end, I'm giving you potentially like just a username and a password, and you can be on the system. And you may actually have the same password, the same initial password as all the other users on the system. So they should know in advance, right, that nothing is there. It should be considered secure, right? And it's all going to be thrown away in the end. So it's not permanent either. But the other thing is that while this is easy to bring them up, take them down, throw them away, they don't have to be toys. So we've already successfully tested the Magic Castle infrastructure with the InfiniBand fabric that you can get on Azure, and also with the EFA fabric on AWS. So we've seen like can interconnect results that are pretty comparable with what we get on our own sites. And you can also configure them in terms of the file systems. They can be configured to run with scalable file systems, right? With a Lustre file system as well. That's something that Fenix from Magic Castle is also interested in having a look at. And of course, the big bonus is that they're reproducible. So in this case, reproducible really means scalable, because we have a number of different events. We can have clusters that are actually event specific. So we can potentially run a lot of these even at the same time, right, for lots of different groups. So this is a really interesting possibility, I think. So what's the status? Well, LearnHPC is really just an idea. It doesn't have any funded manpower. What I do have right now is a limited amount of funded compute resources. So that's thank you to the Fenix Research Infrastructure and also to AWS, who have sponsored me recently as well, because they're interested in support on the EFA fabric. The plan right now is just to check the relative stability, and also EESSI itself is a developing project as well. So there's not a ton of software in there, but there is certainly for the use case that I have, there's enough in there right now to play with. And also I can add more if the guys are willing to take it on. So I think these use cases can probably function already, and I'm pretty sure that they'll work well with the stack. I'm still doing some testing on that. The planned courses for the next, like say, 6 months is to have multiple instances of this course from HPC Carpentry, an introduction to high performance computing, and then at least one instance of this running lamps on HPC systems, because there's also GPU support in Magic Castle as well. So we just need that in EESSI first. And then other use cases as they arise. If anyone has a use case, then yeah, get in touch and we can talk about it. And I was going to say there's a demo. There's not really a demo in the chat. I've given you details for how to log on. I set up a cluster for today, and so for the next hour or two, I'll leave that cluster alive, and you can log on, take one of the usernames that are there, like try and pick one at random, log on and have a look around, and even submit jobs and try something out. It's an 8-node cluster that's up there. So I'll take any questions now.
Thank you to Alan for the talk. If somebody has any questions, then please raise your hand in Zoom and we'll unmute you so you can ask it to Alan. I'm not seeing any questions at the moment, but I think I've got one. Is if other people are looking at helping you, you know, where's the best place that they can contribute? Or
well, so I really am relying on other projects, right, to put this together. So actually the best way to do it, to drive it forward, is to use it for a training course. That would be great, right? So success stories. And because ultimately, yeah, it would be nice to actually have something like this funded, right? And right now, like I say, I have a limited amount of resources on the Fenix Research Infrastructure. They'll give me more if I can justify the request. But to do that, I need to have success stories. I need to have people who are actually using the infrastructure, and also to know like where are the weak points. I mean, I found if you know, things get updated, Magic Castle gets broken and then fixed really quickly. Félix-Antoine is really good at that. But you know, to be aware of this, we need people to be actually using the infrastructure. So really just use it. So get in touch with me and say you want to use it, and we can work together.
I see a second question, so I'll unmute person.
Hi, Alan. I'm Sabri here. So regarding your comment about this funding for machines versus people, if you consider the HPC carpentries even, it's mostly volunteer, right? The most of the work that delivers this peer assisted learning is through um, volunteer work. Although they get paid in other ways, the real contribution come from people who really want to contribute, not because of a salary. So how can this competence center strategies could support these sort of initiatives? It's in simple words, how can you pay people who are actually contributing?
Yeah, I think that's a hard one, right? So Sabri mentioned competence centers, right? So competence centers is another thing out of well, I think it's EuroHPC. I'm not sure. It's certainly connected. Competence centers. Each center has a national competence center. And to be honest, I don't know too much about how they operate right now. I know that the way things were funded there, each country came up with its own plan. So I don't think there's a pan-European plan for competence centers. I think there's a lot of national initiatives there about how they will operate. So I'm not sure there's a unified thing, but there is a pan-European project that links them all together, and that's called Castile, CASTIEL. So maybe that's a good place to look. I really don't know that much more about them, but I do think that's a good place for initiatives that are about training a lot of people at a certain level, right? I'm thinking about the introductory type level, or maybe a level or two higher, but not at the level that PRACE does the training courses. I think that PRACE does a good job at high level training courses, but there is space there for a more introductory stuff, right? And for supporting institutions and universities that want to do these type of courses themselves.